Welcome to our Construction Metalwork Regional Heat Preparation webinar. Thank you for joining us. We're just going to take this opportunity to run through a few items in terms of what to expect at a regional heat, how best to prepare for that regional heat, and give you a chance to ask some questions just before you actually come to the regional heat as well. My name is Joanna O'Brien, for those of you who might not have met me before, and my colleague here is Kevin Scott, who's our technical lead and delivers the Construction Metalwork competition on behalf of Centre and the AWFTA. So to begin with, I'm going to hand over to Kevin, who will start running through some of the information on the tasks.
Hello. There are a number of things as we are trying to improve on from previous years in relation to running the regional competitions, and those tasks are basically questions that people have responded to over the years in relation to technical perfection and basically all of the drawings. When you receive the drawings, the candidate instructions and cutting lists, everything's related to those details. If I run through the first thing that we've got, which is basically what skills do we need in the competition itself, there are a number of items that we identify. Certainly, if I look at areas of concern, drawing interpretation, the number of candidates that have actually looked at the drawing, but there are details in which they are not familiar with in the format that's presented. So the interpretation of all the detail on the drawing becomes a little bit problematic in some cases. Certainly one area is the ability to identify whether dimensions are primary or whether or not they're secondary dimensions. The next area of concern links to marking out and marking out to the primary and secondary. I would advise you to look carefully at the basics of marking out, and the fact that if you use a scriber against a steel rule and you hold the scriber at 90 degrees or adjacent to the surface, you could easily move the required datum away by 0.5 millimetre. This seriously affects tolerance. We're trying to award marks. This is not a competition where we're trying to take things off people. We're trying to give them maximum marks available. To achieve that, the marking out needs to be as accurate as possible. Mechanical and thermal cutting. The thermal cutting can either be oxy-fuel gas, which could be oxyacetylene or oxypropane. It could also be plasma. As far as the thermal cutting processes are concerned, candidates are not reading the candidate instruction sheets, where it clearly states that thermal cut edges must be left as cut. You're not allowed to grind them. We have a mark criteria which looks at width of curve, drag lines, accuracy, general appearance. As far as mechanical cutting is concerned, some candidates will use guillotines, some will even use hacksaws, some will use slitting discs, the likes of croppers. So the mechanical cutting, it's entirely up to the candidate to decide what they want to use for the mechanical cutting part of it. Bear in mind that if you choose to thermally cut and then you choose to file to finish, then you've lost marks because the instructions clearly identify the need to leave the thermal cut edges as cut. Forming processes, quite simply, all you've got to form realistically are the legs for the base of the crane, and this itself has led to people actually producing the base out of 8 component parts, when in fact, if you look at the cutting list, there are only 4. That should be clues to the need to form the tubular. If you choose to put the tubular in each leg in your assembly consists of 2 component parts, then you're going against what the drawing is asking you for. And that takes us back to the interpretation. As far as the assembly is concerned, the assembly needs to be as accurate as possible. We check for not just dimensional accuracy in terms of millimetres with a tolerance. We look for angular accuracy, we look for parallelism, we look for squareness. I would strongly advise people when they're assembling to try and use plate squares and face blocks where available, or face plates, to make sure that the bench that they're marking out on, possibly use that as an assembly aid in terms of carrying out pre-marking out on the table. Canter paper's acceptable, that shouldn't cause any problems. So think carefully about how you're going to assemble this, and bear in mind that when you come to assemble it, the next stage, the joining and welding, may cause distortion. Welding processes will consist of either MIG or TIG welding. There is no problem if people want to use alternative processes to that, although do bear in mind that there is limited time, and in a time frame we want people to put the assembly together. So pick your joining or welding process carefully, and hopefully pick out the process that you shine with. Whichever you use a lot of, use that process. Okay, what exactly are we going to test when you produce a component part? If you read the candidate instructions, in the instructions it will tell you that if the assembly is not completed, then we don't have to mark that. However, so that we give feedback to candidates, the judging panel and the AWFTE together, the centre, have agreed that all component parts will be marked where possible, so that each candidate gets feedback of some kind. We feel that that's only fair to let someone who's put themselves forward for this understand what it is they're being assessed against. The dimensional accuracy is relatively straightforward. If you can measure and mark out to a given size and within the tolerance that's stated, then you'll get the maximum marks. If you choose to ignore the tolerances, you've got to realise and expect that that will affect other things. And that's an obvious statement, but look at it from the point of view that in production, if you're manufacturing, that would be scrap. This is not about scrap. This is about us showing your skill, your competency, your ability to shine out, and hopefully and eventually go towards national and international competitions. Dimensional accuracy doesn't mention angular. There's a tolerance on all angles. It does not mention parallelism. There's a tolerance on parallelism and squareness. So when it says dimensional, it's the whole framework of dimensional accuracy, not just some dimension that has millimeters attached to it. Technical perfection is the finish, the way in which the product looks, how perfect it is in relation to the drawing presented, and how you produce a component that at first glance looks better than anyone else's. This doesn't mean that you need to spend an awful lot of time with emery paper, lynching discs, or grinders. This means that if it's technically perfect, it will need minimum intervention at the end to make it look better than anyone else's. This is to do with the fabrication and welding exercise, the emphasis being on the fabrication. The drilling part of it is straightforward. You may be surprised to see how many people can accurately measure out, can't accurately use a centre punch. And if you're using a centre punch to mark the centre line of the centre hole of the drill, when you start a drill, if the centre pot marker's out by half a millimetre or a millimetre, then your whole centre will be in the wrong place. Drilling itself is actually an art form in that drill speeds and cutting feeds and lubrication actually aid the quality of the hole. I have seen holes drilled with circular drills because of incorrect cutting speeds and cutting feeds and lack of lubrication. Actually looks as if they're square rather than round. So the drilling part does need a degree of consideration. As far as bending is concerned, the only thing to be bent on it is the legs. And that should give you a hint as to what we were saying earlier on regarding the component parts required in the 4 legs, which are not made up of 8 parts. As far as the thermal cutting is concerned, we basically measure the appearance, the fact that it hasn't been ground. We measure the width of the curve, the drag lines being at hopefully 90 degrees to the cut face, how accurate it is in terms of cutting on the line, and again there are tolerances on this. There is nothing to stop you using cutting attachments, circle cutting aids, anything of that kind, which will aid the actual cut edge and the quality of it. As far as welding is concerned, basic welding in terms of weld size, length of weld, the quality of the weld, a lack of spatter, preferably a lack free from defects. If you can visually see undercut, irregular profile, something that's not parallel, the width of the weld is irregular, then you will lose marks. So with welding, bear in mind you are only putting together an assembly essentially made up of tack welds, although there is some welds that are slightly longer than traditional tack. Again, look at the welding symbols, look at the drawing carefully, and make sure that you understand that the welding carries 5% of the marks. So there are marks to be gained here by having neat welds. The materials that you use, you will initially be given a piece of plate that will correspond to the cutting list, together with a length of tube or pipe, and you will be given a length of hollow section. You need to carefully nest the marking out on the plate to get all the component parts out of it, and I advise you to do the nesting carefully. If you start to mark this out and suddenly realise once you've got the components cut that there is an error and it's not possible for you to completely mark everything out, you do have the option to ask for additional material. However, every time you ask for additional material, you will lose a mark. I can assure you, as far as the plate's concerned, there is sufficient material there to cut more than just component parts out. You should be left with a degree of material, a percentage of that left, which is why the nesting becomes important. Equally as well, there is a mark against use of materials. We've got to emphasise that in the use of materials, don't make assumptions that any material is being put aside in terms of the tubulars or the pipe. The pipe on the drawing will specify a length of 95mm. Look carefully at the dimensional accuracy of that, because when you look at the 95mm together with the top hat of the plate, then there is a dimension there that needs to be added to. Don't assume anything is being cut square. If we want to test you, we want to test you for your ability to check basic engineering functions in terms of datums and having the datums in the right area. Where you are cutting hollow section, there is an area of concern here that if you thermally cut it as opposed to hacksaw, as opposed to cutting it with a bandsaw, as opposed to cutting it with a slitting disc on a hand grinder, each of those have a degree of skill that requires an accurate cut. Try to get that as accurate as you possibly can. There is nothing to stop you grinding the size in terms of the tubular and the pipe. As far as grinding the size for the components that are not thermally cut, there is nothing to stop you doing that, although this will waste your time and time management becomes very much important. As far as the general impression and function is concerned, it's very easy to look at a job and say that looks all right, but equally as well, it's very easy to look at it and say it's not parallel, it's not square, and you are being judged, or you're being observed as you actually run through the competition during the day. And to be observed puts a fair amount of stress on you to start with. You're not only competing against others, you've got possibly your tutors there, you've got me there as a judge, other judges will be on hand. You may have guests or visitors, your employers, your training agents. So you need to understand that they will look at that and make or form a judgment, which really has nothing to do on their part with the marking, but on our part, there is a mark towards general impression and function. And we look at that and we try to say, well, yes, that looks as if it is fit for purpose. Would we put that on the market and try and sell it? Maybe a better way of responding to impression and function. Because if we look at it and say, yes, that's a product which we can sell, then we're quite happy that it satisfies the need. The function part is much to do with the pivot plates on the top of the crane, because should you go towards the national competition, there is an assumption that the jib you make at the national would mate to the base that you produce in the regional, and the jib will have to pivot. So the holes that you drill on the top and the pivot plates must allow pins to be entered for a mating component at a later date if you get to that stage. Health and safety. You will go through an induction from the college or centre that you're actually attending for the competition, the regional. That must be adhered to. You are all now training towards becoming time-served tradesmen, or you're in a third-year apprenticeship programme, so you should be more than familiar with health and safety and working practices. And in view of the fact that we use explosive gases, we use slitting discs, cutting discs, guillotines that can remove fingers, grinding discs that can quite easily explode if not used correctly, then the health and safety becomes vitally important. From this point of view, there is a mark and you will be tested against health and safety. Silly things, people momentarily take glasses off while someone next to them starts to grind. If there are grinding bays, there are grinding areas, everything should be shielded off to protect not just the judges, not just yourself, not just people passing by, everyone that could be anywhere in the vicinity. Fume extraction. If it's there, it must be used. Fume extraction by law has to be there, so it must be used. We note every time you fail to follow, adhere to the health and safety, and you will be advised every time you're advised you've lost a mark. So work safely. We want you to work safely. It's standard practice. Please adhere to that. Please ensure you're doing everything you need to. And if you have any areas of doubt, don't use any equipment, any machine, don't carry out any process until you've had clarification from myself, the judges, and the tutors through our guidance to ensure that it's perfectly all right to do that. So hopefully I've given you hints and tips towards what we think is correct. So what we now need to do is to say, right, okay, what are we going to do to prepare finally? In the last minute, all I'd like to say is, look, you will get a set of candidate instructions. Please read the candidate instructions. Look at the competition brief. Look carefully at what the rules of the competition are. Ensure that you know these beforehand. You will get at least 2 weeks' notice. You will have this information. But more than that, you can go on to WorldSkills UK and get that information. Practice using past test pieces, practice measuring and marking out, cutting, folding and forming, looking at drawings, identifying weld symbols. But most of all, prior to the event, manage your own time. You must spend time at the beginning to manage everything, because all of a sudden 7 hours will have elapsed, and in the last hour, some people end up panicking. This is down to management. Thank you very much.
Now, just to give you some contact details, we've left a slide in here that just tells you who the people are to contact. Obviously, for technical queries, Kevin can be contacted, his details are there. General inquiries about the events, how to get there if you have received your event information, then please do contact the centre directly and we'll be able to resend that out for you if there's any information requests like that. If it's more general in terms of WorldSkills UK, the information about the bigger picture in the WorldSkills UK and WorldSkills international competitions, then the inquiries, helpline numbers and websites are there as well for you to actually contact. We've also left on here some benefits of competing. These are things that you can actually have a little read through at your own leisure. But now, more than anything, we just wanted to give you the opportunity to actually ask a few questions. The questions can be posted in the chat box that you should all be able to see on your screen. So if you'd like to just type in a couple of questions for us, and then we'll answer those as we go. So we will just wait a couple of seconds while we have questions come through, and we'll see if we can actually go. Okay. The first question we've got here is, can we jig the assembly?
Okay. As long as prior to the competition, any tools or equipment you bring with me don't result in a jig which you pull out and then fit everything against. However, on the marking out benches, there's no reason why you can't mark out. But jigging the assembly, no, you can't do that. That's not realistically what we're hoping for. Be careful that when you're measuring marking out on benches, you've really got to get this as accurate as you can.
Let's see, we've got a couple of people typing at the moment, so please do remember to hit return so we actually get your question too. I think some people are starting to type but they're not hitting return, so we're not seeing it. So if you can actually just ensure that you hit return, that'd be great.
While we're waiting for that to happen, feel free at any point to contact me if there's any areas of concern. Even no matter if it's the day before, we could far better clarify things to give everyone the best opportunity to excel in this competition. What we're hoping to achieve is to get people in the UK into the national and international stages, which basically is benefit to UK PLC to prove our ability.
We've just got one question here in terms of the drawings. Are these drawings available online or sent out to the centres? The sample drawings have actually been sent out to the competitors, and the actual drawings in which the competitors will work through on the day will actually be available at the competition. So the sample drawings that they've got currently are the basis of the competition, but there is up to a 30% change on that.
The drawings are being sent out as Joanne has just suggested. This year, I will be bringing drawings with me on the day, and there will be minor changes on the drawings. But if you have worked towards the sample drawings, you've used all the skills necessary, I don't foresee any problems at all with the drawings this year. We have endeavoured to correct and modify any previous areas of concern.
I hope that covers all of your question. We have a couple of people typing at the moment, so we're just waiting for those couple of questions to come through. Have these already been sent? I take it that means these drawings already been sent out. Yes, they were sent yesterday. All of the sample drawings along with the competitor booklets, so all competitors should have received those. If your particular competitors haven't received those, please do just drop us an email and we'll resend them to you. So just let us know. Oh, we've got somebody saying, just missed the start of the webinar. Can competitors use some of their own tools and equipment, i.e. grinders, etc.?
There is absolutely nothing wrong with competitors bringing the tools and equipment they're familiar with. What I would say is that we do check the toolkit prior to the start of the competition. If your competitors have anything that would disadvantage other competitors, then we either remove that equipment or we make it available to everyone. You will understand that to do that across the UK, because your competitors are competing against everyone in the UK, then would have to make that equipment available at all centres. I don't envisage anyone bringing anything that's unique or particularly different. But the likes of marking out, measuring, grinders not a problem. Grinders, as a centre, the centres may want to check the grinders to ensure they're happy with the guards, the way the grinding wheels and cutting discs have been fitted. So yes, any candidate with a grinder must have undertook a course in grinding and attachment of brace-up wheels. So not a problem. You have your own equipment, but we will be inspecting it.
Well, that answers your question. We have a couple of other questions. Can we bring templates prior to the competition?
Short answer, that's no. This is a competition based on you being able to read the drawings presented on the morning. So effectively, you producing templates prior to the event may not be suitable. Basically, the templates, anything that you need to produce to make a part, you need to produce on the day. So no, we can't allow templates.
We've just got a couple of questions coming through.
But bear in mind, again, just while we're waiting for other questions, that at each centre there will be vernier height gauges, vernier calipers, which are provided by Centre and AWFTE, which the competitors can use. Sometimes competitors fail to acknowledge the fact that the equipment's there and it's free to use if they wish to use it, which can help certainly with the assembly and the overall tolerances on the final assembly.
Seem to be having some questions coming through slowly, but they're coming through. Bear with us 1 second while we actually just see those so we can make a couple of answers in the last couple of minutes. Of course, if there is any questions that you think of after the webinar has finished, please don't hesitate to just drop us a line on the dedicated email address, which is WorldSkills UK, so WSUK@centre.org.uk. We are more than happy to answer any questions offline as well. Right, okay. Hello there, Frank. Good to hear from you. Please do, if you've got a question, Frank, just please do post that in. We've got another one here. Can we choose to mechanically cut as opposed to thermally cut, Kevin?
No. When you say mechanically cut, obviously you'll be using chop saws and slitting discs, guillotines for plate work. But as far as the circumferentials are required, the top part of it, you must thermally cut that. The instruction tells you to thermally cut it, and the candidate instructions tell you, the drawing tells you that it has to be thermally cut. So you basically can't mark it out, cut squares off on a guillotine and then grind it to size. If it's on the drawing, it has to be thermally cut, then you've got to thermally cut it. And again, going back to what we said earlier on in the webinar, don't forget, you are not allowed to grind or file thermally cut edges that the drawing specifies must be thermally cut.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, that sort of draws us about to the end of the webinar. We do hope you found it interesting. We do hope we've answered everybody's questions. As mentioned, if you have any further questions, please don't hesitate to contact either myself or Kevin directly, but we'd be more than happy to help. But it just leaves us to say thank you very much for actually joining us on our webinar, and we hope you found it very interesting. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Don't hesitate to get in touch if you have any queries. Thank you.
Goodbye.